Well, some major changes may be coming for the Del Mar tracks and tunnels, and these changes expected to cost taxpayers quite a lot of money. Joining us now to discuss these tracks is Sandag Transportation Committee member and Mayor of Vista, John Franklin. John, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks for coming.
Great to be back with you, Lindsay.
Great to have you here. And you know, you and I have done several stories on our roadways, the progress of our local roadways before. And for those that are unfamiliar with the plan, with the study that's going on, discuss the tunnels and what has been, I guess, funded to,
Sure.
I guess, research what's happening with our local roadways.
So we've all been following the news about the Del Mar tracks and the collapses on our bluffs. This is a 100-year-old problem. We started installing soldier piles and seawalls to keep the bluffs from eroding and collapsing 100 years ago. The big collapse that we had last year, or was it a year and a half ago, was a 100-year-old infrastructure that collapsed. So the state of California has given Sandag $300 million to study alternatives, and the staff and the direction that the research seems to be headed is building a tunnel. Cost estimates range between $2.5 and $5 billion for this tunnel. And so one of the concerns that I and a lot of area leaders have is primarily making sure that we study all of the options. Number one, for the alignment of the tunnel. Of course, we want to make sure that it doesn't cause a miniature earthquake for the people who live underneath it. We want to make sure that it's structurally sound for years to come. And we want to make sure that every option, including options other than the tunnel, are also considered.
And the tunnel, where would, I guess, the start and end points, would it just be along the bluffs, or and then it would be a form of, I guess, I know in Hawaii they have tunnels going virtually through mountains.
Yeah.
Talk about where it would lead to.
Well, yeah, so it would start in North Del Mar, and it's a 2-mile stretch. It would terminate in San Diego, and there are 5 different alignments that have been discussed. One of the alignments that probably would have been popular with residents was one that aligned with I-5, but Sandag has kind of ruled that out, and so now we're looking at 2 alignments. One of them that goes under Camino Real, and one that would go underneath some homes. So we have some real engineering work to do to figure out how we do that and not disturb the residents. And
that sounds like it could be very disruptive. Let's talk about how it could potentially impact our taxpayer dollars as well.
Yeah, that's the big issue, and I'm glad you had me on to discuss this. So Sandag doesn't have the best reputation for managing projects to completion. They've asked for multiple increments of sales tax, and right now there's a petition on the street, and if you go to the grocery store, you might be asked to sign a petition to raise a new half-cent sales tax to finance the $175 billion transportation plan for Sandag in our region. And, you know, right now, I'm not sold on a new tax. In fact, I opposed the tax proposal in 2015 that was Measure A, and for good reason. We haven't seen the projects that were promised in our last increment of Transnet sales tax funding, and so I want to hold Sandag accountable to produce and deliver the projects that they've promised voters and that we've paid taxes on for decades now.
And those, the money that they're asking for, what they're proposing to be on the ballot, that's not directly going towards improving our road conditions, but rather toll roads or alternative routes. That's correct?
That's right. A very small amount of those funds would be spent on road improvements, and that's my big message is we need to make sure that maintaining our roadway infrastructure, which is what 98.5% of commuters use, make sure that we appropriately prioritize our dollars to make sure that our roads are serviceable and they meet the needs of motorists and commuters, because ultimately those of us who have to get to work every day rely on them.
All right. Well, very good points that you've brought up, and it's so important to discuss this. I know you did talk about some alternatives to the tunnels. Really quick, very briefly, before we go, can you mention what those might be?
Well, 2 alternatives, and you know, mostly there's broad agreement that we need to realign the tracks away from the bluffs. But we've been spending tens of millions of dollars, in fact, less than $100 million, to shore up the bluffs with what are called soldier piles, which actually hold the seawall back or hold the bluffs back, and then seawalls that prevent erosion. So one alternative that should be studied so that we know all the options, particularly when we're talking about spending billions of dollars, is we should examine examine. In fact, I had a conversation with a senior engineer with NCTD today, and one of the questions that I ask is, how much longer could we continue to keep the bluffs in condition if we invested in seawalls and more soldier pilings? And some estimates say between 30 and 70 years. SANDAG is communicating that this is a 100-year proposal to create 100-year infrastructure designed to get us to a place that's a multi-generational step forward with rail travel. But so in addition to different alignments, one of the options would be simply maintaining the tracks as they are. That's probably not a very popular option because the public awareness of the bluff collapse that has happened has really created a fervor for a better option. One of the other options that's been proposed, and it's one that I'm studying, is potentially not having a train at all. So that might not be the best for our region, but it is one that at least we should consider, and we should understand what a complete realignment of the tracks and the train travel off of those tracks would mean economically for our region and for employees and workers here in our region.
It being a commuter city with almost 98.5% commuters, I think that's a good point to have brought up. Mayor John Franklin, thank you so much again for being with us
Thanks for
tonight.
having me. I appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. All right, Teresa, we'll send it right back over to you at the desk.
Thank